Hello and welcome. Today's topic is our pharyngeal apparatus. Pharyngeal apparatus consists of four basic components. First of all, pharyngeal membrane, pharyngeal arches, pharyngeal pouches, and pharyngeal cleft. Before I talk about these things, you have to understand how the pharynx develops. Okay, so pharynx basically presents behind our nasal cavity and the oral cavity. Behind the nasal cavity we call it nasopharynx, and behind the oral cavity we call it oropharynx, and behind the larynx, so we call it laryngopharynx. Anyway, so the pharynx, it develops from the foregut. How foregut develops, I talked about in my earlier videos that during the embryo folding, our foregut, midgut, hindgut develops. Anyway, so from the foregut we are getting our pharynx. Now, as you can see in this photo, this is our buccopharyngeal membrane. In this buccopharyngeal membrane, there are lots of forebrain vesicles which overgrows and forms a depression area. Okay. Now, this depression area in the buccopharyngeal membrane, it is known as stomodeum. Now, the stomodeum presents cranial to the pericardial bulge. Okay. Now, in the early development of the embryo, it doesn't consist of neck, or it doesn't have neck, because the neck develops after third week of gestational day. Now, what happens? The mesoderm presents in between the stomodeum and the pericardial bulge. It overgrows via intermittent thickening and forms mesodermal bar on the surface ectoderm. After formation of this mesodermal bar, it elongates and separates the stomodeum from the pericardial bulge. Okay. Now, each sided mesoderm, in the right side, left side, each sided mesodermal bars connects with each other horizontal manner and forms a arch-shaped structure. We call it pharyngeal arch or branchial arch. No one talks about branchial arch. It is commonly known as pharyngeal arch because we talk about pharynx. Okay. Subsequently, one by one, we are getting total 6 pharyngeal arch. But the fifth one is very, very short, rudimentary structure. So no one talks about it, and it has no clinical significance. So we are ultimately officially getting 5 pharyngeal arch. Okay. Now, as I said, this pharynx develops from the foregut. So the endoderm presents in the foregut. In between this each arch forms a depression area. Later it is known as pharyngeal pouch. As you can see in this photo, in between two ribs we are getting intercostal space. Okay, same to same, in between two pharyngeal arches we are getting one pharyngeal pouch. Okay, and as you can see in this photo, laterally in between two pharyngeal arch we are getting another depression. This depression is known as pharyngeal cleft. So this pharyngeal arch, then cleft, then pouches, all these things develops after 4th week of gestational day. And together all these structures, our neck forms. First of all, you have to know about the pharyngeal membrane. It's a very short topic, try to understand. The pharyngeal pouch develops from the surface endoderm. Pharyngeal clefts are developed from the surface ectoderm. Okay. And the entire pharynx itself develops from the foregut. This foregut develops from the mesoderm. Now, try to understand, as you can see in this photo, the pharyngeal membrane, it covers or protects pharyngeal pouch and the pharyngeal cleft together. Okay. So this pharyngeal membrane is the overall structure which ultimately forms by the contribution of the ectoderm, endoderm, mesoderm. This pharyngeal membrane also helps to develop our tympanic membrane. Now, our second topic is our pharyngeal arches. As I told you that this pharyngeal arch ultimately develops from the mesoderm. Okay, as I said, the each sided, the right side, left side mesodermal bars fuses with each other and forms a arch-shaped manner. Okay, or arch-shaped structure which ultimately forms a pharyngeal arch or branchial arch. Now, subsequently, we are getting 6 pharyngeal arches. Now, during the formation of this pharyngeal arch, neural crest cells also participates. Now, what happens after formation of pharyngeal arch? Some part of the pharyngeal arch converts into bone, some part of the pharyngeal arch converts into cartilage, some part of the pharyngeal arch converts into ligament, and some part of the pharyngeal arch disappears. And as you can see in this entire box, we are talking about only 5 pharyngeal arch because the 5th pharyngeal arch is very, very short and rudimentary and it has no clinical significance. Okay, try to understand, from this first pharyngeal arch we are getting 2 components. One is maxillary component and another is mandibular component. From the maxillary component we are getting the maxillary bone, premaxilla, zygomatic bone, and the lower part of the temporal bone. And from the mandibular process, we are getting the entire mandible. Okay, from the each side mandible, right side, left side. Now, one part of this first pharyngeal arch converts into cartilage, and that cartilage is known as Meckel's cartilage. From the Meckel's cartilage, we are getting the incus bone, malleus bone. These bones belongs to our ear. Okay. Along with malleus incus, we are getting the anterior ligament of the medius, which ultimately converts into perichondrium. Along with, we are getting sphenomandibular ligament. Along with the bone and the cartilage from the first arch, we are also getting the muscles of mastication like temporalis muscle, masseter muscle, medial pterygoid and lateral pterygoid muscles. Along with the tensor bilipalatini muscle, tensor tympani muscle, and anterior belly of digastric muscle and mylohyoid muscle. Okay. And in the nerve, we are getting the caudonephrine nerve and the mandibular nerve. That's it. The next is our second pharyngeal arch. A part of this, we are getting a cartilage, and this is known as Recher's or Reichert's cartilage. From the Recher's cartilage, we are also getting the stapes bone, styloid process of the temporal bone, then lesser corona of the hyoid bone and the upper part of the body of the hyoid bone. Okay. We are also getting the stylohyoid ligament, almost every muscles of the facial expression along with the posterior belly of digastric muscle, stapedius muscle and the stylohyoid muscles. We are also getting facial nerve from this second pharyngeal arch. Next is our third pharyngeal arch. From this, we are not getting any types of cartilage because it forms the greater corona of the hyoid bone and the lower part of the body of the hyoid bone. From this, we are getting stylopharyngeus muscle and the glossopharyngeal nerve. And lastly, our fourth and sixth pharyngeal arch together combinedly, we are getting the thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, arytenoid cartilage, cornicular cartilage and the cuneiform cartilage. Exclusively from the fourth pharyngeal arch, we are getting the cricothyroid muscle, all the constrictor muscles of the pharynx except the tensor bilipalatini, which already developed from the first pharyngeal arch. Along with that, we are also getting superior laryngeal nerve. Exclusively from the sixth pharyngeal arch, we are getting all the intrinsic muscles of the larynx except the cricothyroid muscle. Along with that, we are getting the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Now, fourth and sixth pharyngeal arch combinedly forms the every larynx cartilages except the epiglottis. There are so many arteries developed from the each pharyngeal arches. Suppose from the first pharyngeal arch, we are getting maxillary artery. From the second pharyngeal arch, we are getting the nutrient artery to the stapes bone and the hyoid bone. From the third pharyngeal arch, we are getting the common carotid artery and the internal carotid artery. From the fourth pharyngeal arch, we are getting in the right side, we are getting the right subclavian artery, and in the left side, we are getting the aortic arch. From the sixth pharyngeal arch, we are getting in each side, we are getting the right and left pulmonary artery. So today to this much. In next video, I will talk about the pharyngeal cleft and the pharyngeal pouch. See you soon in my next video. Till then, bye.